Okay, I've got to the point where I've decided I need to start making some videos and start making them on a regular basis now. But I was going to start making videos last week, but after the events of last week, the increased restrictions and measures for the virus, which are totally destroying our freedoms, I was just kind of so upset and full of rage really last week that I wouldn't have been able to make a video that kind of made any sense or was calm enough, shall we say, because like you watching, I'm sure I was totally outraged at all these new measures which came in. They're the ones that came in, I think it must have been about the 23rd, 24th of September. And again, so many inconsistencies. You can go 30 people to a funeral, but 15 to a wedding. I mean, what's the point of that? Why aren't they the same? It's absolutely stupid. The mask wearing in restaurants now. You can not wear a mask when you're sitting down at the table, but as soon as you stand up to walk out or go to the toilet or when you're coming in, you've got to have the stupid things on, even though there's not really any evidence that they do any good. Again, a load of nonsense in my book. And on top of all of that, there's new talk of lockdown, local lockdowns, national lockdowns, the whole student thing where they're getting locked down into their student accommodations. I mean, it's just becoming a complete police state. And that German doctor being arrested at the demonstration, that just sort of filled me with disgust. When he was just trying to speak and he was arrested and bundled into a police van. I mean, we are supposed to have freedom of speech in this country. Hello. And we've got to the end of the line, and I'm going to, as I say, start making these videos to sort of, put my oar in and get my voice heard, which is on the side of common sense and fair play. This whole police state nonsense has to end, because it's all for a virus. I'm looking down at some notes here. The average COVID death is higher than average life expectancy, or near enough the same. Average COVID death has been a person of 82 years old, and that is pretty much what average life expectancy is. Your chances of dying from COVID, I've got some figures here. If you're under 25, you've got a 1 in 218,000 chance of dying of COVID. Compare that with getting struck with lightning, which is 1 in 161,856 chance. So if you're under 25, well, you better not be going out and doing all those outdoor activities you young people like to do, because you stand more chance of getting struck by lightning. If you're under 45, you've got a 1 in 66,000 and some loose change chance of dying of COVID. That compares with dying of a wasp or bee sting, which is a 1 in 63,225 chance. So you actually stand a little bit more chance of being killed by a bee than you have of COVID if you're under 45. Under 65s, or between 45 and 65s, which is my age group, I actually stand a 1 in 3,300 chance of being killed by coronavirus. Compare that with a 1 in 1,498 chance of dying in a fire. So I'm twice as more likely to die in a fire than I am of COVID. So I mean, I better get rid of this sofa because it looks pretty combustible to me. And even in the sort of highest vulnerability groups, the over 75s, they stand a 1 in 179 chance of dying of COVID. You compare that with dying in a fall, falling down the stairs or just from a fall. You stand a 1 in 127 chance of dying of that. So even with the highest vulnerability groups, they're more likely to die of a fall than they are of COVID. So yeah, I'm just coming out with these figures to put the whole thing into a bit more perspective for you. And why on earth are we panicking so badly, putting up with our freedom's been taken away from us, our freedom of speech being taken away from us, our freedom to socialise being taken away from us, and having to muzzle up with blimmin' horrible masks, all for something where you're less likely to die of than those other things, And the latest figures from Sweden, and I'm sure you've sort of seen many people banging on about Sweden, but suffice to say, they've had 57 deaths per 100,000 population in Sweden, and we've had 63 deaths per 100,000, even though we've had full lockdowns and they've had no lockdowns, and they're not really doing social distancing or masks or anything anymore over there, I don't think. And yet their death rate has been a lot lower than ours. And again, figures that came out last week, 75,000 or minimum of 75,000 estimated excess deaths are now predicted over the next sort of year or two from the effects of lockdown. So we're talking about all these undiagnosed people who haven't been able to get sort of hospital appointments to be checked out for things they're worried about, which is going to no doubt lead to quite a lot of deaths, extra suicides, and all the rest of that stuff. We're looking at 75,000 excess deaths in the coming year or two. And also, why on earth is it all about cases now, not deaths? In March, it was sort of all very scary, sort of 800 deaths a day, 1,000 deaths a day. Now, there's next to no deaths, and it's all about cases. And remember, we're only getting these extra cases because A, there's more testing, and B, it's this very unreliable form of testing they're doing, which gives all these false positives, saying that you've got COVID when really you've got some other coronavirus, which includes colds and flu. So if you've just had a cold and you get tested, you're going to test positive for COVID, and or there's a strong likelihood of that. So all these rising cases, numbers of cases, aren't even a real thing either, or sort of very possibly aren't a real thing either. They're just sort of fudging the figures, and they're basing all these extra lockdown measures and all the other nonsense on unreliable figures. I mean, what the hell is going on there? I mean, even Dominic Raab last week admitted that the COVID testing is 93% unreliable, and if a government minister is saying it's 93%, that probably means it's more like sort of 99% plus. Why is the government only listening to these two scientific advisors, especially when you find out one of them, Valence, has got his sort of whopping £600,000 worth of GlaxoSmithKline shares, which of course is a vaccine company. So if they do come up with a COVID vaccine, he's going to sort of be tripling, quadrupling his money. So he'll be able to swan off to somewhere nice in the sun to retire, whilst he leaves all of us lot who, because everybody's listened to his blimmin' scaremongering are here in this country impoverished. Thanks very much, mate. And why is the government listening to unreliable people like that, or people, at least people who've got a vested interest in continuing the scaremongering? No, that doesn't make sense to me. On top of that, we've got the panic buying I see is starting up again. Toilet rolls are out of stock again in the supermarkets, even though, you know, diarrhea isn't even really a symptom of COVID. So why all these people are sort of panic buying toilet rolls? I never understood that the first time round, and I certainly don't understand it this time round. And I think we're going to be looking upon this in years to come, and future generations will just be looking upon us and calling it the great 2020 madness. I mean, that's what I'm going to start calling it. The great 2020 madness is probably what it will be called in 100 years' time. And people in 100 years, they'll be sort of shaking their heads at us and just thinking, how pathetic those people. But I see there's some hope on the horizon, and there's certain Conservative MPs now who are standing up in the House of Commons questioning the narrative. So I applaud them. Florida is opening up again. They just, in the last 2 or 3 days, they've kind of got rid of all the COVID restrictions, no masks, no social distancing. They're just going to go completely back to normal. And I'd be willing to put on a fair bit of money on a bet that they're not going to see a spike in COVID cases and deaths. So if in sort of 2 or 3 weeks' time they're sort of back to normal with no spike in deaths, I think there's not really going to be any excuse for anyone else to carry on with this nonsense. So just keep an eye on Florida and what's happening over there would be my advice. And that's what I'm going to be doing anyhow. As I say, I've just been very frustrated. Every time I see anything from the mainstream media, I just get and they're scaremongering, I just get so frustrated. I was just so enraged last week, and I was just so upset I couldn't really make a video. I wanted to make this last week really, but I couldn't. I've sort of calmed down a little bit now. But a couple of coping mechanisms. One would just be, this is what I'm doing, and it's a good one for you to do as well. First of all, just don't watch mainstream media, the BBC and all the rest of them. Maybe instead start watching some alternative sources who put out a much more balanced and fair view of things. You can still listen to talk radio. Peter Hitchens is a great guy. He's been a lockdown skeptic from day one. And there's a guy called Carl Vernon, Vernon. He's on YouTube as well. Watch some of his stuff, and he'll sort of. And I found him a great help really in getting through this and putting things into perspective, and knowing that I'm just not the only person out there feeling utterly frustrated with all this. And another coping mechanism, I went onto eBay and got myself a nice little camera, or a nice big camera actually. Didn't cost a lot because it's an old one, but it was back in the day, it was a good one, so it's capable of some nice photos. Just getting out into nature, taking some nice photos. It's probably not the best photos in the world that I was taking last week with this camera, to just get out, try and calm myself down a little bit. Anyway, I'm gonna end the video there, so please like, comment, and if you want to subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be trying to get out many more of these videos now, so please keep watching if you want to, and I'll be back very soon with another video for you. So thanks for watching.